Week 24, Overview, the Persian Wars. Well, you've plowed your way through a lot of ancient and exotic empires, but now we're getting to the fun stuff. You just can't beat the Persian Wars for action, adventure, and impact. It's great material. Enormous, world-girdling empire takes on the little itty-bitty city-states of ancient Greece, and the little guys win. Greece may seem more familiar to you than the Chaldeans or Persian empires. Your kids have seen Greece before. We looked at Bronze Age Greece in Unit 2. We studied the Trojan War and Homer's epic poems about it. For the last 2 weeks, some older teens have been learning about Sparta. A lot of tapestry co-ops have been working at putting on a Greek play for some time now. We'll begin to study classical Greece this week, but we still aren't forgetting the Persians. We'll be looking at one of the great David and Goliath conflicts of all time, the Persian Wars. Let's review the size of Goliath here. The Persian Empire reached into Asia, all the way to India. It extended into Africa, all the way to Ethiopia. Now the Persian octopus was ready to extend new tentacles into Europe. Nothing stood in its way but the squabbling city-states of Greece and their colonies. The Greeks had colonies all around the coastlines of the Mediterranean. The Greeks were sailors, traders, colonizers. They had cities up and down the coast of modern Turkey. That's where the Persians first ran into them. During the 500s, the Persian Empire overran these little cities and made them pay tribute. In 499 BC, however, these cities started to rebel. With a lot of help from Athens back on the Greek mainland, they spent the next 5 years in a state of revolt. King Darius I of Persia eventually crushed their rebellion, and then he sent an army to punish Athens. The first Persian army to invade Greece was huge. As soon as it reached the Greek mainland, the Athenians sent a messenger to Sparta to beg for their help. The messenger ran almost 150 miles in under 2 days, but the Persians were coming on too fast. They reached the plains of Marathon, about 25 miles from Athens. The Athenian army launched a surprise attack against the vastly larger Persian forces. There's a legend that the victorious Greeks sent a runner to Athens to carry the news. He reached the city, said, "Rejoice, we conquer," and fell to the ground, dead. It's 26.2 miles from Marathon to Athens, 26.2 miles, the exact length of a marathon race. Marathon fended off the first big Persian attack. The next round came 10 years later when Xerxes I, son of Darius, led another huge army to Greece. This time the Persians tried to come round from the north. That meant they had to go through the mountain pass of Thermopylae. King Leonidas of Sparta had about 5,000 men under his command, against a vast Persian fighting force. The Greek historian Herodotus claimed the entire Persian force, including the navy and all the support staff, was over 5 million men. There were at least 500,000 there. King Xerxes told Leonidas to surrender his arms. Leonidas of Sparta said, "Come and take them." The Greeks formed a phalanx across the narrow pass. The Persians were faced with a solid wall of shields and spear points. No matter how many Persians there were, they could only get so many into the pass at one time. When one Spartan soldier heard there were so many Persian arrows in the air that they blotted out the sun, he only said, "So much the better. We shall fight in the shade." The Persians attacked and attacked, but they got nowhere. Persians marched over the bodies of their dead comrades only to join them in death. According to one source, the first 10,000 Persians died without killing more than 2 or 3 Spartans. Xerxes sent officers with whips to drive the next 20,000 soldiers into the fray, with no more success. 50,000 more Persians attacked on the second day of the battle, but they were driven back. With reinforcements, the Greeks might have fought forever, but then a local man betrayed them. He led the Persians through a mountain path behind the Greek lines. King Leonidas dismissed most of his forces, but he stayed behind, with his guard of 300 Spartan warriors and 700 Thespian volunteers. It was a suicide mission, and they all knew it, but it allowed the rest of the Greeks to escape. Leonidas and his men fought until their spears broke, and then they fought with their short swords. They fought till their swords broke, and then they fought with teeth and fists and nails. Leonidas fell, and the remaining Spartans defended his body so fiercely that the Persians were afraid to try to take them hand to hand. The last Spartans were killed by a rain of arrows. 1,000 Greeks died at Thermopylae. Nobody knows how many Persians fell. Some historians think it was 20,000. The Greeks who were there said it was 50,000. However many it was, it had a serious effect on Persian morale. The Spartans held back the enemy, but they couldn't stop them. Finally, the Persians were loose on the Greek mainland, and they burned and sacked every city that didn't surrender, including Athens. Some of the Athenians put their hope in a word from the oracle at Delphi, which said that the island of Salamis would bring death to women's sons, but that the Greeks would be saved by walls of wood. These Athenians barricaded the entrance to the Acropolis with a wooden wall and then fenced themselves in. But their wooden wall was overrun. They were all killed, and the Acropolis was burned down. The Athenian leader Themistocles had a different take on the oracle's words. He saw the wooden wall as the Greek fleet of ships. He urged the Athenians to retreat to the island of Salamis, saying it was the Persian women's sons who would die there. The Greeks had been routed from the mainland, but they still had about 360 ships. Unfortunately, the Persians had started with more than 1,200 ships. A lot of Persian ships had been lost by this time, but they still had somewhere between 650 to 800 ships. The Greek ships were bottled up in the harbor at Salamis, and the Persians started closing in. Truly, this was the fight for everything. The Greek ships used the wind and weather brilliantly. Ship-to-ship combat at this time consisted of ramming ships and leaping over the sides to fight by hand. The Persian archers were thrown off by the motion of the waves, so the Greek short swords were an advantage. The Persian admiral was killed early in the battle, which threw their entire fleet into confusion. The only Persian captain with any real skill turned out to be a woman, Artemisia, who rammed 9 Greek ships. The rest were more or less useless. The Battle of Salamis has been called the most significant single battle in human history. It marked the farthest reach of Persian power. Without that wall of wooden ships, Europe might now be a Persian province. What we know of as Western civilization would not have survived without it. The Persian Wars were packed with providential events. One of the more amazing acts of providence was that Athens and Sparta were able to work together. Athens and Sparta united to fight Persia, but it was a little like the United States and Soviet Union joining together to fight Hitler. The two cities could not have been more different. Athens was a chaotic and worldly democracy. Sparta was a rigid military commune. 2 centuries earlier, Lycurgus the lawgiver had drastically revised Spartan laws and customs to stamp out any shred of individuality. Everything from marriage to money to meals was regulated to cultivate a communal identity and obliterate any personal ambition. Spartans were warriors, and nothing else. Sparta was an armed camp. Athens, by contrast, was a zoo. It had become a democracy in 508 BC, just a few years before these Persian Wars began. Older students on the government track will learn about the weaknesses of pure democracy. Their reading this week is Plato's Apology, which tells of the trial and execution of the philosopher Socrates. Socrates was put to death by majority rule for the crime of annoying his neighbors. We'll be looking at this in more detail next week. The Persian Wars almost wrap up our focus on the empires of the ancient Near East. Almost. We'll see one more enormous empire in this unit, when Alexander the Great explodes out of Greece to take over everything the Persians had. Alexander's empire rose and fell faster than any of them, but the Greek language and culture that he spread around the known world stuck around. That's why we're going to take the next 3 weeks to learn more about Greece.